Was a love affair gone sour following the death of Oscar Pistorius' girlfriend, River Steenkamp, on February the 14th, 2013. Now, the Paralympian was arrested and has been on trial since March the 3rd after being granted bail. The trial begins with testimony from neighbor Michelle Berger, who claims she heard screams from his apartment before gunshots were fired at the time Oscar Pistorius killed River Steenkamp. Now, following weeks of grueling sessions, the court adjourned on March the 28th and trial resumed on April the 7th with Pistorius taking to the witness stand. Now, he starts his testimony with a tearful apology to Ms. Steenkamp's family, saying, and I quote, "I can't imagine the pain and the sorrow and the emptiness that I've caused you and your family. I was simply trying to protect River." End of quote. Now, he tells the court that the death of his girlfriend has left him plagued by nightmares, which just wakes him up from smelling blood, and that he's taking antidepressant medication to help with panic attacks. But all this does not give answers to the big question: why was River Steenkamp killed? Welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwoche. We'll take a report on Africa Today. We'll be right back.
I screamed, I said, "Get the f*** out of my house! Get the f*** out of my house!"
That was the emotional reaction of South African Olympic and Paralympic athlete Oscar Pistorius, who broke down in court on Monday while facing intense cross-examination from the prosecution. The double amputee sprinter, whose face is not shown in court, was being cross-examined by prosecutor Gary Nell.
The theme for the day is tailoring your evidence. I'm putting it to you, that's what you're doing. You're tailoring your evidence.
My lady, if I was tailoring my evidence, it would suit me to whisper, not to talk in a low tone. I don't understand how that could be seen as tailoring my evidence.
With no direct witnesses, Nell's main task is to pick holes in Pistorius' testimony and cast doubt on his assertion he believed a burglar was in his house on the night River Steenkamp was killed. During most part of the trial, which has been on for 22 days, Nell has sought to portray Pistorius as an arrogant hothead who is reckless with firearms and refuses to take responsibility for his actions.
Court will adjourn.
All right, Oscar Pistorius has been severally accused of arming himself with the sole purpose of killing River Steenkamp as she spoke to him from the locked toilet cubicle. Now, the claims were made by prosecutor Gary Nell as he summed up his cross-examination on Wednesday. Now, on Africa Today, the trial of South Africa athlete Oscar Pistorius has got us talking, and joining us is barrister Mark Neza Fashion Esquire. You're welcome to Africa Today.
Hello, Africa. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really, it's good to have you. And we'll be linking up as well with TVC News Southern Africa correspondent Marshall Gordon. That'll be later on the program. Now, let's start this way. You've been following this Oscar Pistorius' case in South Africa. Some say, well, it's a high-profile case. It's taking longer than it's supposed to take. But what's your assessment as regards the duration of the case?
Well, a good number of times when we want to look at the issue of law, we have to be able to consider the interface between what is law stricto sensu and what is sociological expectation of law, what law is expected to be doing. And the expectation of the people that are involved. Ordinarily, whatever has happened to Oscar Pistorius and the fiancé or the girlfriend, there isn't anything too special about that. That happens everywhere on a daily basis. But the difference is because the individuals that are involved are celebrities, and then and that's why they are. The issue is at the front burner of media discourse. Exactly. Ordinarily, the effigy of justice is blindfolded. It doesn't respect anybody. Whether you are high or low, whether you are mighty or you are an ordinary person, nobody's above the law. The law is supposed to take its course. But because these individuals are celebrities, therefore they generate all this passion that we are talking about. And then from that point of view, it might be very difficult for you to look at law and the application of law, stricto sensu, in relations to issues like this. You probably want to look at it from a sociological point of view, from criminological point of view, issue of victimology, issue of penology, and it takes me back to my literature class, and it reminds me of the definition of tragedy, because you know, from the involvement of the individual, that is the individual viewer that is listening to us, you know, people who are sympathizers with somebody who has written from, you know, risen from like nobodiness to somebodyness, because by nature this is an individual that is supposed to belong to the bracket of what we refer to as a nobody, you know, rising to become a superstar, you know, through Olympics, and then, you know, falling in love with not less a celebrity.
Okay.
You know.
Now, let's narrow it down, kind of. How would you assess the thoroughness of the cross-examination?
Well, when we are talking about cross-examination, those questions that are being put to Pistorius, the right kind of question to ask him, you know, because it is the duty of a prosecutor to prove his case beyond reasonable doubt. Exactly. And you know, when you are there as a prosecutor, you are there with bearing all your fangs to ensure that, you know, you nail this accused person. You know, so your onus is as much as possible to marshal out any question you can ask to make sure that you nail that accused person. Okay. And so, as far as I'm concerned, I haven't seen anything that is particularly too extraordinary about it. And that's why I feel that if you want to look at, since I started reflecting on the issue of you know, Pistorius, I think it has to do more with criminology than you know, sociological aspect of law than law itself. You know, because if you look at the procedure of the law, you know, adjectival laws, you know, how do you cross-examine advocacy and stuff like that? How does it come to play in the issue of Pistorius? There isn't any way it should come across than it happens to, you know, to ordinary person, to me. So, okay, as much as possible, I haven't seen anything that is particularly extraordinary about the way the guy was cross-examined. Okay.
Now let's talk about his outburst, his emotional outburst on the stand. Is it a reflection of remorse necessarily? That's
why I feel that when we want to discuss Pistorius, essentially we want to be either academic about it or we want to be very journalistic about it. We have to look at it from the concept of tragedy. You know, Aristotle defines a tragic hero as somebody who, you know, who came with nothing, who was born with nothing. You know, he's either born great or he has greatness thrust upon him, or he has attained greatness, and then all of a sudden he finds himself under the pressure of appetite. You know, under the pressure of appetite, okay, to do exactly what he ought not to do ordinarily.
Okay, so we'll come back to this. We have from South Africa is Marcel Gordon, TVC News correspondent. Marcel, it's good to have you on Africa Today. Let me ask you first, how are South Africans reacting to the trial, or continuous trial, prolonged trial of Oscar Pistorius right now?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on. Well, it really has been a rather roller coaster affair, both inside the court, and that has been mirrored by roller coaster emotions that South Africans have been going through, along with every piece of action inside the court. And that's really how it's been. Your anchors on TVC News this week asked me about why it seemed as if the tide of feeling would have moved in the direction of Oscar Pistorius during these last 7 days before he was excused from the stand. And my opinion is that it's not so much that there's been this big wave of change in a different direction with people almost feeling sorry for the Paralympian. I think it had more to do with Gerrie Nell's performance, and that many people who did not know much about his career were taken aback by the aggressive attitude that he took as soon as he started the cross-examination of Oscar Pistorius. So there are those that would have noticed that the opinion might have been such that more and more people on social networks, there was a group of supporters outside the court with a group of white balloons showing their support for Oscar Pistorius. But I really do think it has more to do with South Africans generally feeling as if Oscar Pistorius was kicking that Gerrie Nell was kicking Oscar Pistorius while he was down already.
All right. Is there a time frame as regards how this court process is supposed to last?
Well, it's a little unending. It's like the never-ending story, isn't it, to a certain extent? But that is just how the justice system works down here. This court case was down on the court roll to only be there for 3 weeks. And from the first week, we all noticed already that that was never going to happen. The extension eventually came, putting down a date for the 16th of May as being the last day of this trial. But you must remember that doesn't mean that on the 16th of May, Milady, as she's become known wildly across South Africa, Judge Masipa, won't be giving her decision on that day. There'll be weeks of poring over the various pieces of evidence that have been given. Today, she said that the court record already stands at over 2,000 pages, and she decided then today to grant the state's application for a 2-week adjournment, and that will take place over 2 long weekends here in South Africa. So to a certain extent, it's only 7 working days that we're missing out on. But she was saying, in as much as it was a decision not to lose out on any more time, she felt the time would be used constructively. She and the assessors and the legal teams would be using that time to read through all the evidence that they've received so far, making it easier, hopefully, that when they do come back to court on the 5th of May and come closer to the 16th of May, that once the 16th of May passes, the time taken before she comes back with her decision won't be as long as what would have been expected before. So we're looking at something like June or even July for any kind of a final finding in this court case.
All right, thank you, Marcel. Stay online. We'll come back to you again on this. All right, we were talking about the emotional outburst. Yes. If Oscar Pistorius becomes remorseful, let's say, would it have any impact on the weight of the sentence that's going to rest on him?
Well, no, and that's why when we talk about penology now, you talk about penology, the science of passing sentences and all that. The maxim in law is that justice denied is justice delayed is justice denied, and justice rushed is justice crushed. We mustn't lose sight of that. Meaning, therefore, that there hasn't been jury in South Africa since 1969, according to the report. It is the responsibility of the jury to investigate facts, and it is the responsibility of judges to apply law to the facts that are, investigated by the jury. And so, to that extent, if eventually he finds himself, and that's why I want to look at it from a very, very human angle, the human angle of, to this whole saga, because it paints a picture of a tragedy. Because ordinarily, if you look at, even if given the situation, the physiognomical issue of the athlete, given the handicap, the fact that he has peculiar physiognomy, you expect that the psychology will be a little bit impaired in a way. You don't expect.
Why? What should be the relationship between that and his psychology?
The relationship is that much as we want to use the language the terminology to say that. People who are not disabled, they are not essentially disabled. They have peculiarities. The fact is that some facts are just there for us to contend with psychologically as human beings. And so and that's why I want to look at the case from the very, very psychological point of view. Exactly what happens, what kind of person had he been before this incident? And if you look at all the pieces of information we've been gathering regarding the character of Pistorius, you want to look at character evidence. For instance, somebody alluded to some things, some behavior, before now. That helps you to have an insight into what crimes are likely going to be committed in that kind of relationship.
But can one deduce that from the fact that he has a peculiar situation, like being a Paralympian or something?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. That's why we really cannot discuss the trial in a very dry legal angle, from a very dry legal angle. You have to consider the fact that there are emotions that are involved. Even if it were to be a normal human, a physically fit person, we all have different ways of, different psychological makeup. The society would be the better for it. For instance, if you're able to make use of the case as a type, look into what are likely going to happen to the human condition.
All right, we'll come back to this. Now, after days of tough questioning, Pistorius has now stepped down from the witness box. Nell, nicknamed the Pit Bull, has claimed that Steenkamp was in a rush to leave the house after the couple argued on 14th February last year. Now, Pistorius denied the accusation, insisting that he mistook her for a dangerous intruder when he fired 4 shots into the toilet door. We'll go on a quick break, and Africa Today continues. Thanks for staying with us on Africa Today. Now, the Oscar Pistorius trial is getting to the crux with the 27-year-old Olympic and Paralympic athlete denying that he deliberately killed his girlfriend on Valentine's Day last year. Now, on Tuesday, Pistorius was portrayed as an egotist who was reckless with guns and who publicly humiliated Steenkamp on several occasions. Now, we have been looking at the ongoing trial of South African athlete Oscar Pistorius, and we still have Barrister Mark Neza Fashion in the studio. Now, I want to talk about the telecast of the live telecast of the proceeding. Now, it is not very common on the African continent to televise such kind of high-profile, in fact, generally court proceedings. Now, what is this going to affect the process of legal proceedings on the continent?
Well, we are looking at it from the point of view of what ought and what is expected. You know, what is expected, what people expect, what those who have the opportunity to watch the proceedings. Okay. There are cases in which when you talk about courts, a court is a place, it's a public place where people should have access to anyway. You know, but for certain peculiar trials, like juvenile trials, like some very peculiar trials, court martial or something like that. Those are the things you probably don't want to have before the public glare. But at the same time, meanwhile, let me also remind us that when there is when a case is in court, it is assumed that case is sub judice. Legal practitioners essentially are not supposed to make some comment on them until you have been able to acquaint yourself with the facts and figures after the delivery of judgment. But nevertheless, like I said, we are trying to be prognostic here that how can the society benefit from this kind of occurrence, this kind of event, because at the end of the day, the responsibility of the media is to see how the general public, the ordinary person on the street will look at the tragedy. And then we look at it from the point of view of empathy, from the point of view of sympathy, for the fact that this is a hero. We are talking about the heroes that are involved, and how do they come out
All right,
of that?
We'll come back to this. Now, we have Marcel back online again. Marcel, thanks for staying there. Now, can you tell us about the emotions in the courtroom since the trial began?
Yes, it has been rather draining for everybody involved. But as journalists, we couldn't say that we're going through this exact same emotions as both Oscar Pistorius and indeed Reeva Steenkamp's family and friends. It's been harrowing to watch them react to every picture that's been shown as part of the evidence, to react to every word spoken by Oscar Pistorius, especially as you heard earlier in the beginning of the show, you played probably the most harrowing part of the evidence given in court this week, where Oscar Pistorius broke down as he remembered what he had said inside the house when he believed there were intruders there. And Nell, not missing a beat there, coming back immediately afterwards saying, "Why did you get emotional there right now?" And Oscar replied by saying, because it was an emotional thing to go through, and remembering it takes me back there every time. And Nell put it to him that the reason you got emotional saying the words that you shouted in the house was in fact because you weren't shouting it to the intruders that you believed were in the house. You were in fact shouting it to Reeva Steenkamp, who you knew was in that toilet, locked in that toilet out of fear for her own life because she was in the middle of a big argument. And of course, that left Oscar Pistorius completely defeated and emotional on the court case. And again, we had on the stand, and again we had another adjournment. And watching his emotions and then watching that being mirrored by Reeva Steenkamp's mother really has been a very intense experience. What's been interesting about Reeva Steenkamp's mother in court is that while Oscar Pistorius has been on the stand for those 7 days, she was quite firm. She was quite focused. She didn't break down in public eye. And it seemed that she's been speaking quite closely, what we've been hearing from behind the scenes, that she has been in constant contact with the prosecutors. And it's almost like she has been warned ahead of time when something was going to be shown in court that might be emotional. And she did at one stage say to journalists to the side that she understands why the prosecuting team is doing what they're doing. They're not doing it out of disrespect to their daughter's memory. They're doing it because
Marcel,
they are trying to fight for justice.
Marcel, let me ask you. Let me ask you about Pistorius' family. How are they reacting to the process generally?
It really has been a mirror image. Every time we've heard Oscar Pistorius starting to whimper or his voice cracking with emotion, the cameras obviously aren't focused on him, so the people that they can most focus on are his brother as well as his sister Amy. And his sister Amy really seems to be very close to him, because every time that voice of Oscar Pistorius has cracked when he's been on the stand, that crack has been mirrored in her face as she's frowned, and then eventually the tears would start coming, or she'd put her head down and put her head in her hands. So they have really been close. As part of his evidence, Oscar has said that he has been struggling to sleep, and he's been on sedatives to try and help him sleep. And sometimes when he can't sleep, what he does is he calls his sister. And there was one moment he spoke of when she then had to come over and just stay with him until he could get some kind of sleep or fall asleep in some kind of manner.
All right, thank you very much, Marcel, for your time on the program right now. Thank you. All right, back to us now. In this kind of case going on, at what point does the judge decides or becomes convinced that the accused or the defendant is either guilty or innocent?
At the close of pleading.
Okay.
At the close of pleading, after both parties, both counsels must have closed their pleadings, that's when the judge begins to decide on exactly what to do. Both of them must have closed their pleadings, argued for and against, cross-examination, examination in chief, everything has taken place, and then they begin to, the judge begins to talk about what exactly he wants to do. But like I was trying to say, and the reporter was saying about emotions running high, in criminal justice, justice is supposed to be tripartite, meaning that there must be justice for the state, there must be justice for the accused persons, and there must be justice for the victim. Therefore, emotions are bound to run riot, from either of those, any of those three sections of justices. And so that's why it's very, very important for us that when we are looking at, from the media perspective, when the media is reporting the law and justice, it must be able to look at it from a very sociological point of view, from how do the society benefit from that. If an individual who is supposed to be a model, who is supposed to be a supermodel, has fallen in love with somebody who is a Paralympian athlete, what could have happened? It could have happened to anybody. And that's why philosophers of the Victorian age says that we have to return to poetry in order for man to find his sanity, because at the end of the day, stricto sensu, the law itself is blind anyway. If you look at the effigy of justice, it's no respecter of person. It doesn't matter whether you are a celebrity or whether you are a supermodel, and it has happened, for us to see. So as much as possible, I think it should be our responsibility in the media to highlight the aspect of the human angle, to this story, and then look at how does society benefit, from the trial.
Now, in this case, would it be applicable at the end of the day if the family of the girlfriend, Steenkamp, claim financial damages of any kind from Oscar Pistorius?
Oh, sure, that is going to happen. But the fact is that from our own municipal jurisdiction here, culpable homicide carries its own punishment, like any other punishment, whether it is manslaughter or it is murder, it is, and also, so as much as possible, it should be the responsibility of the judiciary to exactly find out exactly what sentence to mete out to the convict. But if you are looking at it from the point of view of what lesson do we learn from issues like this, I think we have to be more transcendental about it.
Yeah, let me ask you, what lessons do we have to learn? Let me ask you that now directly.
Yeah, the lesson is that it happens to anybody, and that there isn't anything that is particularly special about Oscar Pistorius. He's just as human as any other person, and anybody could have been in a relationship. This could have happened to anybody. I'm not particularly looking at the pleadings. When you get to court, you are bound to deny some things. If you find out that it's going to be convenient for you to deny, to deny, you deny. If it's not convenient for you to deny, you decide not to deny. But those are technicalities at the end of the day. But they are dry things. That the philosophers warned us that we have to be very careful about sterile particularization. We should think about universal issues. That could affect, that could happen to you, could happen to anybody. And for those of us who studied, who did so much about literature of some regions, like South Africa, for instance, the problem you probably had when you were talking about South African literature in the past was issue of racism. But now you find out that whatever is common, whatever happens to anybody could have happened to anybody anywhere in the world. So as much as possible, I think that the society has a lot to learn from the fact that it could happen to anybody.
All right, Magnus Afashion, thank you very much for coming on Africa Today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
All right, and we also thank Marshall Gordon for joining us earlier on. Now, Pistorius could likely face life in prison if convicted of the murder of Steenkamp through the locked door of a toilet cubicle in his Pretoria townhouse on Valentine's Day last year. And he has pleaded not guilty to a charge of murdering her, claiming he thought there was an intruder in the house and that the shooting was an accident. Now, the trial has drawn wide interest both in South Africa and abroad. Now, before the shooting, Pistorius was one of South Africa's most revered sportsmen, admired for his prowess on the track using carbon fiber prosthetics that earned him the nickname the Blade Runner and brought him a clutch of Paralympic medals. Now, the Blade Runner now runs to save his life from rotting in jail. That's our show for today. Watch previous episodes of Africa Today on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. And until we come your way again, I am Okwoche. And always remember, this is Africa. Bye for now.